Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be doing another one of my Star Trek book reviews because I like Star Trek books, if you hadn't got on to that. And today we're going to be talking about one of the newest released Star Trek books. In fact, I think at the time of this recording, it is the newest released Star Trek book. And that is Star Trek Agents of Influence by Dayton Ward. Kind of slurred that there. Agents of Influence. I'm under the influence right now. It's fine. I'm just drunk I review drunken Star Trek books. Sorry, yes. Let me say that without slurring my words. Agents of Influence by one Dayton Ward, who is a regular Star Trek author, and one who is a personal favorite of mine. I actually think Dayton Ward, besides maybe Una McCormick, who might be my favorite Star Trek author that is sort of the current batch of Trek authors at the moment, I think Dayton Ward is probably my number two. And that's not against any of the other authors, the ones that their style resonates more with me. And the reason that Dayton Ward's style resonates with me is very, very clear in this book, Agents of Influence. Because what Agents of Influence is about, it's a much more like clandestine, sort of darker, more political underbelly of the Star Trek universe. Una McCormick is a writer who does like more of the top level politics, like of government level, whereas Dayton Ward is someone who usually likes to get down into like the nitty gritty sort of politics that you don't really see, but you know have to be going on behind the scenes of Star Trek. And that is very clearly the focus of Agents of Influence. What Agents of Influence is about is something that we have seen hints of throughout the Star Trek mythos and going all the way back to Star Trek the original series, and that is basically dealing with the spy network that we know existed all the way back in the original series between the Federation and Starfleet against the Klingons and vice versa, the Klingons having a spy network against Starfleet. Now, we saw that in the episode Trouble with Tribbles, where we had a Klingon pretending to be a human in that episode way back in the original series.
Jim, this man is a Klingon.
We even saw it in Discovery recently, and this novel even calls that out. They don't exactly say, like, Ash Tyler from Star Trek Discovery was a Klingon who pretended to be a human for a while. He doesn't explicitly call that out in this novel, but there are hints towards the fact that we know Ash Tyler existed in this novel. There's like sort of oblong references to it, which I thought was cool and sort of a nice, like sort of hinting at the sort of larger structure. But it sort of led to this greater question that, again, we've seen numerous times throughout every single Star Trek series of basically spies going into other civilizations pretending to be a member of that race. So this story, Agents of Influence, focuses on 3 Starfleet officers who have been pretending to be Klingons, who are spies in Klingon territory, who finally got exposed and are trying to get extracted out of Klingon territory. And when they are getting extracted, the Starfleet vessel that is meant to pick them up basically gets attacked by a sort of Klingon secret weapon being tested on them, and the Enterprise having to come in and rescue those 3 Klingon agents because they have a bunch of information that basically Starfleet really needs to use against the Klingon Empire. So that's the basic setup of this, the Enterprise going in to try and rescue 3 Klingon agents, but there's a lot of stuff at play in this story, again, focusing on the political underbelly that you know has to exist. And I like that he extrapolates this out into what this actually would mean for Starfleet, that we actually get to see basically the spy games between all the different entities here. And I like that we get to see in this novel things from a Klingon point of view, basically the Klingon High Council trying to deal with, like, how do we stop these spies from getting back to Starfleet, and then Starfleet on our side basically saying we really need to get these spies back to us because they have information that we need. And so there's just a lot of like really interesting politics going on throughout this novel. And also Dayton Ward does a really good job at taking that sort of, it's already kind of complicated idea that I just spoke about, but then complicating it further, because we even have the Orion Syndicate kind of getting tossed into the mix here too, as they're being hired out by the Klingons, a separate group of Klingons who didn't even know about the spies, to sort of test their weapon. And so there's all these different factions at play. And then even more, what I think is really cool of Dayton Ward is Dayton Ward wrote this other Star Trek mini-series along with a few other writers called Star Trek Vanguard. And that was just sort of like a 5 or 6 book series that was really excellent, kind of again dealt with the political seedy underbelly and had its own mini arc. And there were some storylines left over from the end of that arc that gets dealt with in this book. And don't worry, if you haven't read Vanguard, you don't need to have read it to be able to understand this book. It kind of gives you some glossary explanation, but if you're a fan of the Vanguard novels, there's some elements, some characters, and ships that appear in this book that are from the Vanguard series that if you're a fan of that, it'll be nice, like, oh yeah, cool, I see it to see that. So, yes, I've sort of been ranting and raving about just the setup of this novel, but I think the setup is what makes this novel so interesting and unique, is that it's just a really complex web of political ideology, and I always just really, really like that about Dayton Ward's writing. The problem that I have with this novel, and this is like a smaller problem, but because there's so much going on in this novel, it actually makes the actual story of the USS Enterprise trying to go and save the ship and the Klingon spies that are on that ship as well, it kind of makes it feel very short. Most Star Trek novels, I usually feel like get very complicated. There's a lot of beats in this story, a lot of like different like places that we get to go with the story. Whereas here, and maybe there's something to be said for keeping it a little bit simple with all the stuff going on, but honestly, I breezed through this book, and normally that's a compliment, but it also, in some ways to me, while I was reading, it kind of felt a little bit sad because this was such a complicated situation. It had so many moving parts that I honestly would have liked to have seen it get more complicated in actually the bones of the story. Because really, it just boils down to the USS Enterprise crew goes and tries and saves the Klingons, kind of gets caught up on a bunch of the machinations of stuff, and then rescues them or not. I won't spoil the end of the book for you, and gets out of there. And so I was honestly just a little bit disappointed that it didn't get more complex, because the setup and the structures and the games at play were already insanely complex. I mean, most of this video has just been me trying to explain it to you. So I was a bit disappointed there. But other than that, I really liked the characterization of the numerous characters in this novel, and I liked that there are a few twists and turns in the story. Again, I won't really spoil the ending for you so that you can, get the full experience reading the book, but there are some twists and turns in the story that don't go the way that you would naturally expect. There are some questions of maybe there are spies on the ship, and I liked that the instant idea of any writer would be to say, like, oh, it's the Klingon, the spies that were humans pretending to be Klingons. They kind of, and having people distrust them. But I liked that most of the crew of the ship was like, no, we can trust them. It felt very Starfleet to me that they didn't just instantly go to suspecting the people that were spies because they looked different than humanity. That they were to actually just sort of take away their prejudice from that moment. And again, I won't spoil how that all shakes out, but I just liked that it felt a little bit more of an evolved humanity, even within the prejudices and spy games going on within the story. I think it was just a very interesting line for Dayton Ward to toe. So overall, I think that this is a really, really excellent Star Trek novel. If you are someone who wants to get more into the nitty-gritty, dirty feel of the politics of Star Trek, which is something that I really like, and is something I'm always kind of disappointed that the Star Trek show proper doesn't always get into, like the sort of like baseline, like how this would actually function politics of the Star Trek universe, this is a perfect novel for you. There's a little bit of disappointment in the sense that it doesn't get as complicated as it could, but that's also a personal taste thing. Again, there's something probably to be said about keeping the story at least a fairly bare bones when you're dealing with so many other things on the periphery of it. So maybe keeping the basic story smaller is smarter. But for me, it was a little bit disappointing on that front. But in terms of everything else, the way it explores the world, the way it explores its characters, the way it ties up and ties together so many different elements of the Star Trek universe, I don't think you could go wrong with Agents of Influence. Fantastic novel by Dayton Ward. I also know that he follows me on Twitter, so Dayton, if you happen to be watching this video, thank you so much. I love your work, and I loved this book, despite my small reservations with it. You're a fantastic author, and I just want to say thank you for writing these books. But beyond all of that, I hope that didn't pop up on the mic. You might have heard a little hit on the mic there. But beyond all of that, what did you think of this book? Did you like Agents of Influence? Have you read it? Did my review encourage you to go read it? I'd love to hear all of that down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Star Trek reviews, Star Trek book reviews, discussions of Star Trek, other stuff besides Star Trek. Believe me, I do other things besides Star Trek on this channel, so don't forget to subscribe. You can also help me out over on Patreon if you want to help make this channel even better. I also do a podcast with Council of Geeks, as well as Lore Reloaded and Lore Runner, so two separate podcasts. What the Frel, where we rewatch Farscape, and a Star Trek RPG podcast that I do called Star Trek Behind the Lines with Lore Runner and Lore Reloaded, so you can check out both of those podcasts. And beyond that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all my patrons who support me over on Patreon, and an extra special thanks to my commander level and above patrons, Ashley Allen Bocello, Miranda Janelle, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Randy Thompson, Mouse Pounder, Jemshin, Susan Banks, Wellington Marcus, Lorena Mesa, Alexander Miller, John Steele, William Stewart, Michael Beam, Gavin Robinson, Aaron Brown, Christy Marie Johnson, Jason Knott, Maggie Evans, Maeve, Subraxis, Zach Cody, Dante St. James, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Auntie Cat 808, Patrick Shannon, Din Hagney, Mark the Edge, Bree Beecher, Polly Mina, and Gretchen Badger. Thank you to all of you. I couldn't do this without you, so thank you so much for your support.